Welcome back 2 seconds later to the Daily Dose with Robert Cochran and me, Susan Scarlett. We were talking about the very beginning of
Yeah.
what we are now so thankful for every day.
Yeah.
That is this sweet little nonprofit, the Yes and Exercise organization, which has quite a vision and quite a lot going on. And
You
um,
had something at the end of our last dose where you were talking about how it started to make sense to you about it being about quality of life, which had to do with my intention, right? That I wasn't on a complete fishing expedition. That this applied to that. And what's interesting is I can see looking back then, and I just met with my dear friend and mentor James yesterday and Dustin, and
nice.
we always reframe a little bit, and it's interesting to see where they're at because they were my PhD mentor and my PhD best friend, who basically helped me survive the program.
Yeah.
Um, but the idea that came out, one of the big ideas that came out of the All In was rebranding Parkinson's
Mhm.
and the emphasis on the psychosocial emotional side. Now, back in 2019, I knew this. You clearly knew it too, and which was one of the reasons it made you the perfect. We hadn't yet ID'd it exactly. We were using quality of life as our kind of umbrella phrase, and the problem with that was it's too big of an umbrella for science anyway, right? They need to know what do you mean by that. So we had to find the lanes, the things, how specifically do you mean? And now this new umbrella has come forward by some pretty big names to talk about it as psychosocial emotional. Now those are have a little more grip to them, and that people are seeing it's at least as big a part as the motor dysfunction side of Parkinson's,
Mhm.
and they're willing, and that's the rebranding part, to go as far as to say we can no longer just call this a movement disorder, which is what it has been for 200 years. So we're on the cusp of something big.
It was shaking palsy, right?
That's
Dr.
it, Dr.
Parkinson.
Parkinson's. That's
That's
it.
what people saw.
And
You
and,
can't
and
see
so that
psychosocial, except you can. And I think for you, 5 years and 15 and 23 years ago, it was your dad. It
right.
was seeing the changes in this joyful man.
Yeah.
And then when you guys took your road trip and you had a camera going all the time and you were being yourself, just asking searching questions, your dad was awesome. He he was really honest every time you asked him a question that was right on the edge of a scary question to answer. Your dad just spoke the truth, and I think that helped you really dial into the psychosocial is as big as the motor.
Well, if we only saw my dad on that trip, it would have been problematic. But the fact that he got to see people in different stages dealing
Oh,
with it
that's
so
cool.
differently,
Yeah.
the number of different interviews, and as we look forward to the fourth film and the Boys of Summer film, it'll be good to revisit. The one we come back to time and again is John Trudeau in Detroit, who was much further advanced in his Parkinson's. And he's the guy who rather dramatically, not on his attention, but just in terms of impact, said, "Don't let the disease eat you."
Oof.
And the physical
Yeah.
part part of that, but he was talking about the psychosocial emotional too. That's really what he was after
Oh, it
with
has to be. It,
yeah,
it, it has to be what that meant
yeah,
to
absolutely.
consume you. Oh, yeah. It's,
So that's and the problem, as it were, with the first film was it's kind of the problem with Parkinson's. It's what some people, again, and people are getting off of this phrase too. They're saying the honeymoon period, where people think it's not that bad, and they say things like, I'd rather have this than colon cancer. And you go, you don't recognize what you're saying because there's the shock of getting it, and then there's this period in between. You're like, but the symptoms aren't that bad.
mhm.
It's going to progress. It's never not progressed for people. It's going to progress. Now, how you live with it is variant, of course, but let's not act like it's not going to progress.
Well, and the way it progresses is so different from one of us to the other, and the time
Listen,
frame in which those changes take place
and, and
can
that,
allow that little um, delusion of thinking that
well,
you're
delusion's an
getting
interesting
away with
word.
it.
It's an interesting word because we know delusions and hallucinations are a real clinical problem in Parkinson's too, and that's getting run is so important as well, to say, wait a minute, this isn't just the shaking palsy.
Mm.
There's so much more going on here.
Well, just for the sake of putting it out there, Ryan Reynolds, who lost his dad to Parkinson's, and his mom are doing this beautiful thing for anyone seeing this who hasn't yet run across their series of interviews called More to Parkinson's.
Okay.
There's more to Parkinson's than movement issues.
And
Um,
that's the full circle. That's where we're at as we wrap this. I'll give you one final bit. James, my mentor, again told me yesterday, because again he was someone who came in and really rescued me. Didn't know anything about Parkinson's, but was kind and wise enough to say, "You're on to something." Meanwhile, the experts, the Parkinson's experts in my field, were failing me. They were literally, I mean, they were failing me in terms of not doing their job, but they're also failing me in terms of my comprehensive exams. Had I stayed with them, it wouldn't have worked. James is now on a new uh, he's on a new board with a student who is whose emphasis is on the psychosocial emotional side of Parkinson's, and he's on it with my former chair too, who was the one who had the exercise pedantic nature, and he was telling me how interesting it is to be on that. I said, well, let your student know, I'm happy to advocate for her and be a
yeah,
resource for her, because the fact that she's doing that research is awesome, and we're on the cusp of something. So
I wonder if the former person that you guys have in common now has had a change of something, awareness or
it would be interesting to revisit. I don't know that I'm ready to do that yet, but
nope, no
yeah,
need. You got enough on your plate.
yeah. All right, pal. I'll see you on the next dose. Hang tight. Happy Thanksgiving.
Happy Thanksgiving.